Hello, welcome to Brian Moore's Full Contact with the Telegraph. After a week's rest, ready to go into round 3 of the Six Nations, and what a selection of games you've got coming up. 2 of the tournament's form sides are away from home for the very first time. Ireland, 2 wins under 2 from under their new head coach Andy Farrell, but next up for Farrell is Farrell Jr., captain of England, and the trip to Twickenham. Obviously it's a ground he knows well because he was 4 years as the defence coach for England. Another man who's familiar with Twickenham is the former Ireland and British Lions captain Paul O'Connell. He'll be joining us today to look ahead to Sunday's clash, and we'll ask him whether the Irish can go all the way under Farrell. Alongside Ireland at the top of the table, there's France. They look rejuvenated under the guidance of Fabien Galtier and Shaun Edwards. They face their first away trip from Paris on a Saturday afternoon away to Wales in Cardiff, which won't be easy. We'll look ahead to the game in detail with our studio guest and with the former Wales scrum half Rupert Moon. Away from the Six Nations, domestic rugby in England dealt a blow after the RFU revealed its plans to slash funding to the Green King Championship by 50%. We'll be getting the thoughts of the Telegraph's chief rugby correspondent Gavin Mayers on what this means for the future of the competition, and what about their newest side Saracens. I don't think you'll have a blind bit of difference on Saracens, and we'll be taking all your questions. Some good ones as usual because you're a bright bunch. Right now I'm delighted to say alongside me for his full contact debut is the former France and Biarritz franker Serge Betsen.
Hi Brian.
Hello Serge. France, well, tackling, discipline, hard work, c'est fou, huh?
Yeah, yes, definitely Brian. It's very very important to see France playing that level, as you just mentioned, discipline, organization. I think all that things come from one man who everyone know, very, very important man, which is Shaun Edwards, who joined the French team in the summer and tried to change the way we were defending. And I think, as Shaun mentioned all the time when he was coaching me at Wasps, is the attack starts in defense. Then I think France managed to do that well the first game against England.
What is it about Shaun Edwards? Because I know him not very well, I know him reasonably well, but you know him a lot better because you've worked with him. What is it about him that makes a difference?
I think that it's really passionate on what he's do. He's really lively, out loud, and he feel everything he say to the players, and that is very contagious. And I think he's really share what is believed the most is believe in yourself and trying to make the most of what you can do to tackle and stop your opponent. Then this is what is about Shaun Edwards, and I think that's aspect is very important in the game, and it's also a human, very, very close to the player, very in line of talking and sharing what is all about in defense, and people really enjoy it, and the relationship is really simple. Even people don't really know or understand what he say when he talk because it's up north, but people can feel it and can really transfer that to the game.
Because the one concern I had, obviously I've not been in the French camp, you have for ages, but I've been told that, you know, on certain occasions with the players and some coaches, they have arguments and so on, and I just wondered whether the French would accept Shaun, because he's very direct, isn't he? You do it his way. And he's right, because obviously he's being judged on that. I just wondered whether the French might say, you know, no, actually, no, I'm not. No, I don't want to do this.
It's funny you say that, because in France it's mainly like this, where the player are being coaching for a long time, which is very directive. And I think that suits his coaching philosophy. Then for some reason, I think we can see the way France are defending, and we can see the way he improved the defense of France, and definitely. It's funny that before he moved to France, we had a meeting. He asked me to have a talk, discussion, to understand French philosophy, players, etc. we really have a very frank, honest conversation about France and the potential there, and just by doing this, it shows how important was for him to move to France, and how he cared for everything he do, and he's really passionate on this.
Well, that doesn't surprise me, because he's a very thorough man, isn't he? He's a very detailed man, and he wouldn't leave that. Look, what's the reaction been like to the performances and the new side, the new look from the French rugby public?
But I think they really enjoy it, and you can see that in the stadium. You were there in the Stade de France against England. The vibe was so positive. The people were really enjoying the game and really supportive, which was really rare from the last few years. And I think that creates a great atmosphere, and also the belief to the players. And now we can name some players like Aldritz, François Cros, Charles Olivon, the captain, and those players we can name them each. Then that is, for me, is bring a lot of confidence around the public, and the way they play as well is very positive. Then all that makes the France looking very good, and I believe it's just a starting.
Well, let's turn our attention to the big clash coming up at Twickenham. Delighted to say that we've got Paul O'Connell, the former Lions and Ireland captain, who's joining us now. Paul, hello, mate.
How you doing, Brian?
Okay, 2 out of 2 for Andy Farrell so far. What's your assessment overall, having seen those 2 games?
Yeah, I think it's been quite impressive from Ireland. I think the Scotland game, the first game Ireland played, actually, it changed. The day Finn Russell left Scottish camp, that actual game changed for me. And I don't think that's going to be good for Scotland in the long term. But in the short term, I think it probably would have galvanised them as a group, and would have probably put them in a good place in terms of team ownership for that Irish game. And I suppose Ireland were probably lucky to win that game, but they did win it. And I think that was actually a really important win for Ireland. And I think on another day they could have lost it. They were excellent against Wales. They created an awful lot, defended really well. Scrum was excellent, probably rode their luck a little bit again, but a bonus point win at home to Wales, is a massive result. They're World Cup semi-finalists. They won the Grand Slam last season. They've been playing great rugby. I think they're probably a different side without Jonathan Davies in the team. I think he's a terrific player, but it's still a massive win for Ireland. So Ireland are looking quite good. I think they're probably trying to hang on to all the good things from the Joe Schmidt era, around their ruck, around their excellent set piece, very good exiting side. And then they're probably trying to add 1 or 2 wrinkles. I think you'll probably see the forwards passing a little bit more a Kyle Sinclair, and maybe a little bit more offloading. But I think they're in a very good place now. And, sometimes you need a little bit of luck to get a bit of momentum, particularly when there's a new coaching staff that just starts and takes over. So Ireland are in a good place. They won't be, there's no doubt there's no fear of them being overconfident heading to England. They've taken 2 heavy beatings from them the last 2 times they played. They're probably very realistic about where they are, but they're in a far better place than they were, I think, than the last time they played England in the Aviva Stadium.
Well, you're a former Ireland captain. What do you make of the decision to give Johnny Sexton the captaincy over someone like, say, Peter O'Mahony or James Ryan?
Well, look, I played with Johnny for a long time, and a lot of guys I think don't outwardly go for captaincy or don't outwardly want the captaincy, and if they're offered it and it's given it to them, they're very, very grateful. But I think there's a lot of pressure and a lot of stress comes with captaining a team as well. But I think of all the players in Ireland, no player wanted to captain Ireland more than Johnny Sexton. For a long time, I think he's been really eager to do the job. And for a long time, he's probably been more or less doing the job anyway. I mean, even when I played with him, I would have relied incredibly heavily on him. And I would have wanted him to almost captain the team alongside me. It's particularly when you're out half. You are really the main decision maker. I think the captain might point to the post and make a few other decisions like that, but in terms of how you're going to play the game, in terms of kicking, in terms of running the ball and where you do that, the out half makes most of those decisions anyway. So he's a fantastic guy. I mean, he probably doesn't come across certainly to a British audience because they wouldn't know him maybe as much as we do. He's actually great fun. He's great fun to be around in the group, but he's very, very serious when it comes to training, when it comes to games. And winning, I think, doesn't really satisfy him. It doesn't matter how much he gets paid. He is incredibly driven, and he's a great example to young players, really. You know, he is just a relentlessly driven rugby player, no matter how successful he is, no matter how many caps he gets. And I think he's a great choice. And I think James Ryan is ultimately going to end up as the Irish captain. And I think you want to protect him a little bit. You want him to be taking the captaincy at a time when he's really eager for it and really ready for it. And I think that's probably what's going to happen now.
Can't get away from it. A lot of the build-up will be centred around Farrell Jr. and Farrell Sr. Is there anything in that? You've been around them both in your time with the Lions and so on. What do you think about that?
Listen, I think one of the good things Irish rugby did a few years ago is they realised the value in investing in top-class coaching and the difference it can make. When you've good players, if you can invest in top-class coaching, it can make all the difference. And I think that's something Ireland has managed to do really well. There's been a few mistakes in the last few years, but by and large, you look at the quality of the coaches, you know, even going back to Pat Lam, Michael Cheika, obviously Joe Schmidt, Les Kiss, some of the foreign coaches we've brought in have been top class. And I think when he lost his job, when Andy Farrell lost his job at Ireland, a lot of us guys that have worked with him on the Lions would have been saying to Joe, if this guy can be grabbed, we should grab him. And he came in, and I suppose along with Joe and maybe the IRFU, they were trying to put in place a plan for succession, maybe similar to what New Zealand do, where they promote from within, and people that know the system and know how it works go from being a defence coach or an attack coach to the head coach. So from an Irish point of view, it's a great appointment, and it's been really successful. And I think just the way those two characters are, Owen and Andy, they're very similar. Owen to me would be very similar to Johnny Sexton. Good fun, knows how to enjoy himself, but very, very serious about the job as well, and very professional in how he goes about his job. And I would say that's the way it will be. They'll probably speak on the phone maybe Saturday night before the game and wish each other luck, and there'll be no chat again until after the match. So it's an unusual situation, but two ultra professional guys that I don't think will affect them in any way. It's probably not easy for their mom, for Owen's mom and Andy's wife, but listen, I actually don't think it has any effect on the game, really.
Because you know what? They're both going to come out and say, it's not about us, it's a wider thing, it's insignificant. What they should say is, you know what, or certain Owen should say, he's given me it since I was a kid. He's beat me everything when he was, and now I've got a chance. Of course I want to get one over on him. And because people will understand that. But never mind, let's move on. Look, what have you made of England so far? Where do you think Ireland can and will target them?
I think England's win against Scotland was similar to Ireland's win against Scotland. I mean, that when you play in those kind of conditions, it's made for an upset, particularly away from home, particularly after the losing to France and being quite inaccurate. So I thought England's performance to dog it out and just get the result. It's one of the things I enjoy about working with the BBC, Brian, is you speak to some of the older school guys a lot of the time, and they're just first and foremost focused on how do you go about winning the rugby match. And I think some of the younger crew, we've been, I'm including myself with the younger crew at 40, but there's so much talk about performance and how did you perform. But the main statistic is the scoreboard. You have to win the game. And for me, England winning that game when it was ripe for an upset was a big moment for them. I thought they probably should have beaten France when we look back, and certainly we were impressed with France and the defence and the Shaun Edwards effect. But when you actually looked at the game again, England had a multitude of opportunities to win that game and probably should have won that game. So I think England are probably in a very good place heading to this game. They've built a little bit of a defensive mindset now with Eddie in the media, with Ellis Burns obviously in the media after the game. And I think heading back to Twickenham with the possibility maybe of some better weather, I think England are probably ripe for a very good performance. I mean, my favourite player to watch at the moment is Kyle Finkler. But the last 2 weeks when I've watched him against France and against Scotland, his passing game, it's non-existent because it's so difficult to play in those conditions. And he's been one of the main reasons for me England have played so well. And I've never seen a tight head prop that his first and second option is to pass or offload. And he seems to create so much space for England in how he plays. And he hasn't been able to play like that in the last 2 weeks. So I think England are in a good place, but Ireland are too. And that's what makes this weekend so special for me. I think Wales, with France beginning to feel a little bit of confidence, and Ireland, England, with Ireland beginning to come back and find maybe some of their 2018 form again. I think it looks like a great weekend of rugby.
A prediction?
I think Ireland are going to play really, really well. But I fancy England, particularly at home. I mean, I think England won't have forgotten their performance in the World Cup semi-final against New Zealand. I was at that game, and I just thought England were operating on a different level. I don't see any reason why they can't get back to that level. Certainly, Billy Vunipola isn't playing. He is a world-class player. He can generate quick balls when it looks like there's absolutely no hope of generating quick ball. And Ireland probably don't have as many players like that as England do. But I fancy England. I'd go England by 7 points.
Well, we will see. I'll see you there, mate.
Okay, cheers, Brian.
Take care. Thank you. Paul O'Connell, a bit surprising, actually. Thought he might plump for Ireland. I'm pretty sure he's right. There's only going to be one score. Which way it will go, I don't know. He's also right that, England gave Ireland a shellacking last time out, but Ireland won't fear coming to Twickenham because they've got a relatively good record there over the past 10 years. How do you see that one going?
It's a very, very tricky one because as you mentioned, Ireland play decent rugby since the Six Nations started, and to see Andy Farrell back at Twickenham and face his son team will be huge in terms of an emotion. But for me, the game will be in the front row, which is always has, and I think the way England play against Scotland last week ago, they have to replicate that. They have to be very, very ruthless in the set speeds in order to try to create a platform of domination to hopefully bring George Ford and all the backs and to create that momentum. We're going to help them to maybe score the tries, and I think it is going to be exciting to see how Ireland will react from that, and I definitely believe that's going to be a very, very close game, and why not see a draw?
Serge, huge and very distinguished back row player yourself. What is your view of picking players out of position in the back row, like Curry at number 8, for example?
Yeah, there were a lot of talk around that, and I believe Eddie Jones have his view of why he do that, but again, it's very difficult for the player to adapt himself as quick as possible or on the way people want it. But is that a decision for him as well to be moving to play a position he never play? People don't know. Then it's difficult to analyze that, but for sure it's going to be it's a weakness for England, because we know how good he is as a 7. We know how good he can disrupt the game, opposition game, by his tackling, by his ball carrying, and it's important to give him a minimum confidence on the way he play. And so far, it was very difficult for him to start in Paris with some amazing back row player. And again, they would be facing Ireland, who are very, very experienced team. And again, if is that one of the weakness for England, it will be that position where he should be in the front foot, not in the back foot.
Well, you make the point. The assessment of the success of this is not just, how well does he do at number 8. It's how well does his replacement do where he would have been, where we know him and Underhill have been playing very well. So, and when you saw Don Brandt's performance against Saracens, well, I still don't understand that, but I'm not the coach. There we go.
Yeah, but it's true that we need to match expectation of the primary role of the flanker, and if Underhill is one of the best tackler of England, he should be brought in that position in order to do what he do the best, which is stopping the opposition, jackal and tackle with always a positive tackle, which is make a huge pressure into the opposition.
Hello. Sorry to interrupt your podcast. I just wanted to take a quick moment to tell you about another programme from The Telegraph. I'm Ben Riley-Smith, the Daily Telegraph's US editor, and I've spent the last year exploring the scandal over links between Donald Trump and Russia for my new podcast, Crossfire. What I found was an extraordinary untold story that kept coming back to Britain.
The big gorilla in the room was, would Trump want to meet Putin? Would Putin then meet Trump?
And he said, and in any case, the Russians might use some material that they have on Clinton.
This is dangerous. This is really dangerous.
I've been tracking down those directly involved, from Washington to Cambridge to Belgravia, to try and find out what really happened and what it can tell us about this year's election.
So we're looking at the backdrop of Russia. We're looking at what they might be trying to do to our election.
Over 6 episodes, I will unpack it all, chunk by chunk, through the voices of those with direct knowledge.
Most people didn't even want to talk to me. I'm a guy getting death threats. I'm a guy whose life has been totally turned upside down.
I will tell you this, whoever it was, I hope they get punished for it.
That's in Crossfire, available now wherever you downloaded this podcast.
A lot of the French players have come from very successful age group teams. Do you expect them to be able to continue their progress? Because the jump from, say, under 20s to full international is quite a wide one, but they look, many of them, to, have been going quite well. How do you think they will go around trying to keep this progress?
But I think one of the change for the last 2 years is that generation of players who win the World Cup under 20, and it's funny because we talk a lot about that now, but you have to remember England. The last 4 years were a world champion under 20, and those players are Owen Farrell, Elliot Daly, Itoje, Joe Lansbury, all that player getting the experience from the under 20. Then, yes, I definitely believe that the young talent player should learn from that experience and get the game time in order to experience high level, in order to transfer that to the national team, then this is the pathway of the player to be from under 20 to national player. Then that part is very important. If France and the top 14 understand that they will have more younger player who are going to play in the French Championship, top 14, and get that experience and follow that. I think now France starting realizing that we need to invest in youngster. We need to invest in the young age in order to bring a new player and a new prospect for the national team.
Well, look, everyone over here, probably because he's English, has been focusing on Shaun Edwards, but obviously Fabien Galthié must have had a hand and some part in the success so far. What do you think he has done differently?
Well, I think the most important thing was before the starting of the Six Nations. Just to remind you, Galthié was brought in the French team for the preparation of the World Cup in Japan. Then that's, for me, I was a little bit concerned. I was worried because I thought if it's not happened really well in the World Cup, that's going to create some, I think, distinction in the camp, in the French camp. But it's happened that the French team went really well, and the coaches, Fabien Galthié, as well as Laurent Labitte, manage really well the players, and the player really enjoy their professionalism. Fabien Galthié is one of the first professional coaches in the era of professionalism, and I think player enjoy that. In the past, there were a lot of coaches who were not used to be professional coaches, like within the French club. And that creates a little bit of, let's say, miscommunication, and the way of work wasn't the same. Then I think Fabien Galthié brought something really new with a very, very rigid plan where everyone has to follow. And I think that's give a lot of confidence to the players. And also there is Raphael Ibanez, who are also manager within the team. And those group of staff coaches bring a lot of confidence, and the way they work is bringing excellence within the camp, and that is, for me, a lot of things we changed from the past.
Well, Galthié, you're right. He's got a long and experienced track record. So long, he's so old that I played against him. Talking about scrum halves, Antoine Dupont, for me, he's been sensational.
Yes.
First of all, what were you expecting him to do before the tournament, and how pleased are you with his form during the tournament?
Listen, he did really well before the tournament, because the World Cup in Japan was one of his trademark, because even France lost in the quarterfinal against the Wales. Antoine Dupont was one of the leader already within the French team. Then today, that's not a surprise for me. It's very, very important for the game, because everything he did it with a lot of effectiveness and flair. I love the way he see the game, because he see the space before.
Clever, isn't he? Clever.
Yeah, very clever. He see the space before he play the ball, which is make a huge difference. And he don't have to be huge physically. He's very tiny, but the way he play, the way he run with the ball, the way he use his forward to move and create mismatch is very, very unusual, and I'm really pleased to see him playing, and he's one of the great assets of French rugby from now.
Well, you mentioned the back row, the Captain Charles Olivon and Gregory Aldrit. Do we have a settled French back row now, and how good can they be?
But I think it's very, very positive to see Charles Olivon as the captain playing the way he's playing. 2 games, he scored 2 tries. He is a great leader from the Basque Country. And also the number 8, Gregory Aldrit, is so immense. And again, that's come from what's happened during the World Cup. And they keep that momentum within the player and the selection. And I think they will be going through a very hard time on the weekend in Cardiff, because...
This is a point, isn't it?
Yeah.
France, home, usually quite good. France away, who knows?
Exactly.
What do you expect? What do you expect?
I expect a lot from the back row. That for me the transition. Then for the first 2 games, they were immense in the sense of collectively and individually. They were a very high profile player. But now I want to see them in a very outstanding atmosphere, which is Cardiff Millennium Stadium, and the way they have to handle the challenge of facing the Welsh team who are on fire as well, with the new coaches and new player. I think it will be a very tight game. The fact that all the staff know exactly what Cardiff look like when the Welsh team are in the top level, it will be important. And I definitely believe this game will be the really transition game to see if we're really up to win the tournament.
Well, look, why don't we get a Welsh perspective for the clash against France? Joining us once again, I'm pleased to say, is Rupert Moon, the former Welsh scrum half. Hello, Rupert.
How are you doing?
Just been talking about Shaun Edwards.
Crikey.
Well, what can you say? I mean, he's going to be a factor in this, isn't he?
Oh, look, he is, and I've known him for quite a while, and talked to many players about his style. It's grunt and growl, so he doesn't need to speak any language other than that, and seems to inspire people in that way.
Look, Pivac, people expected quite a lot, I think, unrealistically, in terms of changing style and suddenly going out there. What have you thought, and what have the public thought about things so far?
I think there was, as we would all like, is that way of just chucking it about a little bit more. I remember Gareth Jenkins and Nigel Davis talking about the Welsh way when they were involved. I think it is nice and romantic, and we've evolved certainly over time when Gatland began to using the ball a lot more to the end of his tenure, and then for Wayne Pivac to pick it up and do a little bit more. But as you know, as we know, that winning that matters. Offloading and playing a little bit more is nice, but not many people remember how many offloads and how many wondrous tries we scored in the 12 years in the most successful period in the history of Welsh rugby. So I think they've got 2 or 3 games worth of the Welsh public giving them a little bit of leeway, but then after that, it will be, we want to win.
Well, look, one thing that's not helping Pivac is the injuries that Wales have got. Jonathan Davis being badly missed, I think, as indeed he would be. But, you know, I've heard that he might be recalling Rhys Priestland. Priestland's, am I right? He's 10 caps short of the 60 cap rule that Exile's supposed to have before they're picked. What would you think if this rule was broken in this instance?
Yeah, I think it would be wrong. I think they put it in place for all the right reasons, and a lot of people have been nicely captured or made life choices based around that rule. And I think there was a lot of deliberation and negotiation and discussion for why they put it in place. And I just think it would completely go against what the principles of what they put it in place for. But I understand there's quite a lot of red tape in theory that has to go through for him to be there. But of course they can cut it quite easily and quickly if Wayne wanted that. But I'm thinking like at Sam Davis, he's a mercurial young fly half who's come through the system and developed and made a choice to stay in Wales to play for the Dragons, played in the Barbarians game, did okay, had man of the match performances over Christmas, and then he hasn't had a call since or been involved, which is odd, but he's the one that you should be giving experience to 4 years out of a World Cup, I would have thought.
Well, I mean, the last couple of clashes, big ones, Six Nations World Cup and so on, they've been very, very, very close. It could have gone either way. They went a particular way. Bearing in mind what you've seen from France, what we've seen from France, the new discipline, the way that they are playing, could they do what will be difficult, obviously, and come down to to Cardiff and win?
Yeah, look, they certainly have the capabilities, having played a few times against France and won a few and lost a few. Yeah, they're a frightening prospect if they get their stuff together, so to speak, because of the volume of players available to them. Same as England, if they were able to just be all together, those two should really dominate world rugby. But yeah, I think Wales, as in Wayne Pivac, have to be bold here. I remember back to when Steve Hansen took over the Welsh team, the Welsh squad, and it was about performance and developing for the future. You only get experience by gaining experience. So we've got to invest. We've got a great group, a squad of players, of a large proportion of which will be all right for the next World Cup. So transitioning players in is get caps into them early, and that's where I think in key positions the players aren't going to be able to make it by the time the World Cup comes. And I'm in the belief of senior players that are going to be hanging on in by the time that comes because of the games in between. So I think we've just got to bite the bullet, give some young talent some tough experiences and stick with them. And there's no tougher than France, and then going to New Zealand ain't going to be easy. But someone like Sam Davis went down to the South Seas, that's right, and played Samoa and Tonga under the guidance of Robin McBride and was successful. And not many people can say they did that as a 10.
Well, we won't have long to wait. I'm sure you're looking forward to it. So are we. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for your contributions. As always, Rupert Moon. Thank you. Serge, what are your memories of the Six Nations? Because your stay in the French side was very successful. It was possibly the most successful France have had in the Six Nations. What are your memories of it?
But great. It's funny that you mentioned it's been 20 years now. It's great memories, great feeling, because we start, my generation start the Six Nation, which is luckily we won the first Grand Slam of the Six Nation in 2002. 2 years after the Six Nations started, then the memories was so positive, so enjoyable. On that, I remember playing in 2000 my first Six Nation, and the tournament wasn't a great tournament for us, and I have a very tough moment. But 2 years after 2002, we managed to do something very special, and it starts with playing away from home, which is Cardiff, where we play Welsh team. That game, I have to say, was one of the toughest game ever. With Quinnell brother, we were carrying the ball one after the other, and when you see the pressure come from the supporter who are booing or shouting when one of them were carrying the ball, you can get scared and feel like the wall going to fall into the pitch. Then that was one of the great game ever, and the memory was fantastic because we won the game, but that was by 1 point and last minute.
You're right, but interesting because in that year against England, same year 2002, Clive Woodward said about your performance, he is the only player that I can say was a single-handed reason we lost the game. So he said it was all down to you. So what do you remember about that?
I remember that I tackle a lot Johnny Wilkinson, sometimes late, but at that time the video wasn't there. But no, it's a great was one of the great performance ever from the French team. It wasn't just me. I think that generation was Fabien Galtier, Raphaël Ibanez, Olivier Magne. A lot of great players from France, and we wanted to create something special. We wanted to be one of the well-known French team ever in that era, and we managed to have that. And also, you don't forget that we have a coach who were really, really tough on the player, and Bernard Laporte was one of them. And I always say that he helped me to be who I am today, because he brought a lot of discipline within the team. He brought a lot of respect. He's one of the coaches who brought a referee within the camp in order to understand the rules of the game and to make France don't make mistake and don't have a lot of penalties. Then those aspects was new to rugby and to us, and I think we learned a lot, and we wanted to prove that we can be on the top level.
Well, that certainly was an improvement from when I played, because I used to wonder whether the French knew any of the rules, actually. Anyway, but a year later, you go to the World Cup semi-final. It went wrong. Why did it go wrong against England in the semi-final?
It went wrong because we didn't have the right strategy, I think. Because I remember that game so well that I cried after the game. I remember scoring the only try to the game, but what happened was during the whole weekend the weather was great. It was sunny and never rained, and we play our best rugby. I remember the quarterfinal against Ireland. I think we were really confident to play French rugby, to play open rugby, and on the day of the game, it starts raining from the 7 in the morning.
Well, I've got a question from William Fotherington saying, if it hadn't have rained, do you think you would have won?
I'm not sure, but I think we were close to do something special, because we didn't really have any plan B to the game. And I remember that after the game, some English players were talking about how they trained during the weekend. Even it was sunny, they trained with the ball weight, because they knew the rain will be there, which is something we never thought about. Then, yeah, it's really, really a tricky question, but I think if the rain wasn't there, it would be another history.
Well, I'm not being wise after the event, and I remember this clearly, because as soon as it did start raining, I said England will win this one. A couple more questions. This one from a Frenchman. Do you know Michel Roux Jr., the chef?
Yes, exactly.
Good chef.
Yeah.
Harlequin season ticket holder.
Yeah.
Don't take against him. Well, look, he can't support Wasps now because they're not in London.
Exactly, it's true.
He asked about Shaun Edwards. We have touched on Shaun Edwards, but just answer me this: how much? Difficult to say percentage-wise, but what of the performances you've seen so far? How much do you think is down to him?
I think England, France was down to in let's say 40%.
Okay.
When you look at Italy, have to say the defense wasn't great. Maybe because the fact that the opposition, they think that opposition will be very, very loose. But it's also, I think, the mindset, the fact that the pressure were more into the England game than Italy. But I think now, going to Cardiff on the weekend, this is where we're going to see the real work of Shaun Edwards, but also the real work of Fabien Galtier, because that's going to combine two things. attack and defense. How organized we're going to be in defense, but also how say strategic we're going to be in order to find the real gap to score tries and to make France being very, very, very dominant in attack. And I think today we didn't see that against Italy, which was for me the easiest way to see the way we are attacking, the way we are moving the ball around. And I think that game going to crystallize those two things to make sure France are in the good spot.
Just a last question from David Gilbert. In this country, the championship clubs have had their funding cut by 50%. Now, he's asking, can you tell us a bit about the French second-tier system? How does that work?
But it's a little bit similar to England, but it's true that the budget are miles away. The Pro D2, which is equivalent of championships, the club are getting, 3, 4, 5 millions to run the club, and they are professional. They are professional to compare to the championships. Our coach long time ago.
Where does that money come from?
That money comes from individuals, people who are business owner or the city who also support. Don't remember that in France, the city provide a lot of support for the clubs every time. Then
quite often they own the stadiums, don't they?
Yes, exactly.
The municipal stadiums. So
exactly.
The club doesn't have that
to
expense.
run, exactly. Then that make a huge difference. And to be fair, the way I see the championships run here, it's on my side. I think it's in line with what people can have as a budget. But at the same time, I don't really understand the strategy of England. Why they cut the budget without sometimes to help the club to adjust that kind of cut, and I think it's very difficult to understand the strategy, where they're coming from, and why they're going to do with that money. Are they going to invest to the women's? Are they going to invest to the national team again?
We'll be talking about that with our next caller, because that's I'm glad you led on to that. The biggest news domestically has been the RFU's decision to cut funding to the championship by 50%. Well, that means it'll go down from just over $500,000 to $250,000 for each side. I was writing today about that, but why don't we get the thoughts also of Gavin Mayers, the Telegraph's rugby correspondent, who's joining us now. What's your take on it?
Yeah, Brian, it's. I think we're really looking at a cause of the RFU having to make cuts because of the financial mess they got themselves into after the World Cup in 2015. I think it's there's two real issues, Brian. There's both the impact of the cuts and then both how the RFU have managed the situation. I think we saw last week the sort of just how angry the clubs were at being called to a meeting without any notice or negotiations, and being told that their money was being halved, and having been told that they hadn't made strategic targets, which some say they weren't aware of, or some say they were never judged with. So I think overall we have to really look at the impact on the development of young talent in England, and whether the RFU are right to go in a different direction and effectively hand over that responsibility to the Premiership club.
Well, my view was this. Look, it's tough for the Championship, but the Championship is a very strange beast in the sense that you've got fully professional clubs, one of whom is the one that always comes down from the Premiership. You've got very almost, professional semi-pros, and then you've got the avowedly semi-pro stroke amateur pros, if you like what I mean. And there's a huge disparity between top and bottom. I've never understood why the Championship do not get in bed with ring fencing in this sense, provided that they have an automatic right, one of them, to come up every 2 or 3 years or whatever. I just don't see, because people have been putting in the papers, it takes £7 million a year to make a successful challenge to get up. Well, they're having to do this every single year. All of them who have a realistic ambition. It doesn't make any sense to me. They're not doing themselves any favours.
So I understand that, Brian, totally. And I think the RFU were trying to make the point that a sort of 200,000, 250,000 cut annually will not impact a club that has realistic ambitions of going up. And that absolutely is true. But I think also we just have to look at what is the role of the RFU? Is it to develop young English players? Is it to help their own clubs develop? And I think if you're imposing a sort of quite a brutal funding cut, whether you think about the Premiership or not, it's going to impact players who benefit from playing in that league, that level, against men, not necessarily on under 18s or Premiership Cup. You're playing against some experienced professionals and you get a club culture. I just find it interesting, like quite a lot of the Premiership players, some England players, talked about how valuable the Championship was to them. And I think we shouldn't overlook the fact that it's not just about getting up to the Premiership, but also developing young English players. And if there isn't a second tier, one wonders what will happen to that second tier. There's no commitment to play English players. We could see more overseas players comes in. And then my fear would be that more and more young talent won't have games to play, and they'll just end up in academies lifting weights.
Every pound that the RFU spends somewhere means that another part of the game, and they all want the money, and I understand that, but the RFU at the moment doesn't have it, and probably never will have enough for what everybody wants. When you take away one bit, you give to someone else. What are the clubs saying about the need for the long-term stability of the game, for the grassroots, the women's game, and so on?
I think it's a very good point, Brian. And the RFU's argument would be that they're trying to get their spending under control post the World Cup 2015, where a lot of money was spent for the right reasons, but maybe not with this proper scrutiny. The one thing against that, Brian, is the problem the RFU have is they signed this 8-year agreement with the Premiership clubs that they just can't really afford. And that, to me, should be under more scrutiny. The fact that they're locked into another 4 years. In 2016, they signed this thing for $220 million to the Premiership clubs. At the same time, they gave the England players squad a massive uplift in their fees for playing for England. At the same time, they hoped that their revenues would continue to grow, and that hasn't happened. And what we're seeing now is the cuts really coming down on the grassroots and on the Championship clubs, where the two areas where the RFU can make cuts. They've also gone through a huge redundancy programme over the last 2 years. And I think it's just, I think what the debate should really move on to now is what is the next agreement going to be with Premiership Rugby, because that is the absolute massive financial drain on the RFU's finances. And really at the minute, it is just without their power, because they are locked in, as I say, for at least another three seasons.
Difficult question. What, if anything, can be done to make this situation better? I suppose it could make a lot more money. I mean, that's one thing.
Yeah, I think in the medium-term future, the RFU's finances, Bill Sweeney has come in, and he has a reputation for being strong on the commercial front, as he proved to be away. He seems to be quite confident that within sort of 3 or 4 years, the RFU will be debt-free again. The East Stand will be paid off in that sort of similar time frame. And I think then we could see that the next World Cup cycle, that the finances do strengthen. But I think in the very short term, I think the RFU must have some sort of negotiations with the Championship clubs, sit down, talk to them, see if there's a way that they can resolve this, which, without leaving the sort of acrimony and the, you speak to any Championship club, Brian, your old club Nottingham, they really feel the RFU have turned their back on them at a stage where the news was broken to them 3 months before the end of the season. And it's only a 12-month deal, so I don't know how they're meant to do any sort of business plans beyond the next 15 months, which for any sort of business to know about their funding going forward is difficult. So my hope would be that the clubs and the RFU are able to sit down together and try and thrash out something that is a little bit more acceptable to them and provides a little bit more security in the medium term, not just for the next 12 months.
Well, of course, they've got a newbie in the Championship next year, Saracens no less. Jamie George, Elliot Daly, both saying they'll stay at the club even though it's in second tier. But Allianz, as we know, are now pulling their sponsorship. So will this have any effect on Saracens, or will they just find money from somewhere, as they always do?
Brian, I think as long as Nigel Ray remains committed to the club, and as yet we have no reason to doubt that, they are going to be a going concern. But I think what we are seeing is with such a title sponsorship and Allianz stepping away from the club, their whole plan to redevelop the stand, the big grandiose plans for redevelopment there, further redevelopment, and also growing the brand both in Europe and globally, and also more importantly, just trying to get some more bums in the seats at Allianz. They don't have the natural supporter base that you would have at Leicester or Northampton and Gloucester and Bath and things. So it's a real setback to that. I think they are dealing with a lot of change at the minute, and they are trying to find a way to keep their best players. If they do that, they will certainly come back straight back up again. And I think if they are able to sort of demonstrate to the wider rugby community that they have moved on, and that you will then begin the process of attracting new sponsors. But it is tough times, Brian. I think the club were probably initially too slow to react to the news and the fine and the second sanction with points deduction has left the club in a really difficult position, and this will really test their management and I would say governance of the club.
Gav, take care, mate.
Yeah. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Well, that's all we have time for this week on Brian Moore's Full Contact with the Telegraph. Thank you very much to my co-host Serge Betsen and to all our guests. I'll be back every Monday evening during the Six Nations from all the usual places you get your podcast from. So, if you've enjoyed this episode, or indeed any of the previous episodes, please do subscribe. Enjoy the weekend. We'll catch up with you next week. For now, goodbye.